What would happen if you were okay just the way that you are? Do you get some sense of resistance, some tightening in the gut, clenching in the chest, a voice protesting that this cannot possibly be the case? I cannot imagine that this is good enough. If so, that is not a voice to be believed. That clench, that tightness, that contraction does not mean what you think it means. It doesn't tell you that something needs to happen, that you need to do something else, that you need to be better. It doesn't tell you that at all. It tells you that there's a conditioned response. And that conditioned response leads to feelings of not being good enough, because it has learned, for whatever reason in your particular lifetime, that in order to survive in this world, you have to see yourself in one way and everybody else in another. There have been sensations in the body, and those sensations get translated into a belief that there must be action because they are there. It's not actually the case. So our practice is getting used to feeling sensations without acting upon them, without taking an assumption that I have to do something because there is a sensation in the body. There are sensations in the body all the time, and you don't act on every one of them. But largely it's because not all of them have this extra layer of believed importance tacked onto them. So become curious about which sensations in your experience do have this extra meaning tacked on. This extra meaning that seems to imply that you need to do something because they are here. We're working on our practice to not completely lose touch with them, because there are times in our life where they will still be valuable. But to break that initial connection that believes that as soon as you feel something in the body, it must be the truth, and it must be something you need to act on because it is dire if you don't. Turn the attention around and focus on that sensation alone. What is it actually trying to convey? What can it actually convey? What it's trying to convey has to be a product of thought, because the sensations in the body can't speak. What it is actually conveying is that there is some tension in the chest. There's a fluttering in the stomach. There's a feeling of buzzing vibration in the body. That is the extent of what a physical sensation can convey. Everything else has to be imputed by the mind. So notice that discrepancy. Step back from that immediate identification with the emotion or with the sensation in the body and get some perspective. Oh, hold on. What I always thought was a feeling of burning anxiety is actually this particular unique cluster of sensations in the body. And then, does it have to lead into action? Does it mean that you need to do anything to either make it go away or to follow that train of thought that shows up in its wake and act out that train of thought, whatever it's telling you to do? In other words, if you're afraid of elevators and you start to walk into an elevator and you get this feeling in the body that just says, no, 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 no. And it's this contraction and it's this, you feel your pulse elevating and everything seems to be saying, no, 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 no. Take a pause. does that series of sensations, the elevated heart rate, the sweating of the palms, the everything else that comes with it, does that actually know that that elevator is going to get stuck or crash, or that there's any sort of danger on the other side of those doors? Well, of course not. You have had that every time you have approached an elevator, and probably none of the elevators that you have approached, felt that sensation about, and then ran away from, have actually gotten stuck or crashed. It's an assumption that we're making based on biological signals in the body. So instead of just immediately jumping to act on those, or assuming that they're trying to convey something to us that is absolutely of dire importance, take a breath and then recognize these are sensations. There is a pulse that is increasing. Sweating is happening. Feelings of tension, contraction, buzzing, all of those things can be there. But don't let them get identified with and made into something more. If you have time to sit with this, meaning you're not in a situation where you are in immediate panic mode, but if there's something that you can bring to mind that causes a feeling of stress or anxiety, sit down, close your eyes, and bring to mind, however you can, that particular situation that causes the stress or the anxiety. And if you're a visual thinker, you might see an image of it. If you're an auditory thinker, you might hear a sentence or sentences describing the event. If you're neither of those, you might have some other conceptual map that works to create an awareness of this potential situation which causes that stress in the body. And I would like for you to see or hear or conceptualize whatever it is that's there, and recognize that that is a thought, however it's showing up. The visualization in whichever sense field it shows up is just a thought about a situation which is not currently here. If you were currently in the situation, you wouldn't be feeling anxious about it. You might be feeling fearful about it or some other reaction. But if you're having anxiety or stress, it's because it's about an imaginary time which is not here right now. So note what is actually here. You have a thought about a situation, and then tune into the body. Oh, here is that familiar constellation of sensations again. Here's all the buzzing. Here is all the clenching. Here's the increased heart rate. All of those things that we have come to recognize as being anxiety or stress are here now. But notice there is an assumption being made that those sensations in the body and that thought, however it's showing up, are somehow connected. You are imagining a link between the two. What you are feeling in the body right now is being felt in the body. It does not connect to the future. It doesn't connect to any time other than right now in this body. The thought that is showing up does not connect to a future. It doesn't even connect to this present experience in the world around you or in the body. The thought is its own little pocket universe, just floating in this sort of indefinable space of the mind. What I would like you to do is to recognize that this idea about a future event is happening in this mind space. The sensation, which seems to be a preemptive anticipation, showing you how scary and dire and unwanted that situation is going to be, is just showing up in the body. And I want you to snip that imaginary thread. Now, there are a couple different ways to do this, but it depends on what works for you. If you are a visual thinker, you might even go so far as to sit, imagine that potential scenario, visualize it in the mind, feel the sensations that are rising in the body, in response to the thought about that particular situation, and visualize the gulf between those two, the gap between those two, that there is a sensation floating here, somewhere in this bodily sense, and then there's this thought, which is happening somewhere slightly related, but also slightly in its own space. And that thought is portraying this event that you really don't want, whatever the dreaded circumstance is. And I would like you to imagine right now that there's a white thread that connects the sensations in the body across this empty gulf to that bubble of thought, however it shows up for you. And feel both of these happening at once. You're feeling the sensations in the body. You're seeing this imagined situation. And I want you to imagine you have now snipped that white thread. And then just notice what happens. Do those sensations in the body still matter anymore? Do they still mean what you thought they did? Does that thought about a future possibility still matter anymore? Does it still have the importance that you once thought it did? Is the whole situation as dire as you once believed? And of course, you can do this practice if you're an auditory thinker. You can feel the sensations in the body, and you can hear the thoughts about the situation, and you can imagine some sort of a thread or a connection between the two, however you best can conceptualize it, and then imagine snipping that. Another option that you have, without imagining the white thread, is just to notice that there has always been a gulf between the two. There has always been this gap where the two are not really fully connected. But sometimes it can help to have that sort of visceral feeling of, separation, that we have severed that connection, and now the two are free to be as they are. But you can also just recognize these are sensations, that is a thought. And if you open your eyes and look around, there is a huge gulf between these sensations in the body and the actual world that's experienced out there, and the thoughts that are happening in the mind and the actual world that's experienced out there. For this level of inquiry, it is really important to notice that there is a difference between the reality of the world around us and the unreality of the thoughts in the mind, of the sensed reality of the sensation in the body, but the disconnect between these apparent regions of being. All right? It's like the body sensations exist in one place. The mind, with all of its internal audio and visual and all of the other thought-based senses, are kind of located in a different space for this part of the practice. And then whatever you see, touch, smell, and feel and taste around you is also, in effect, happening in a different place. Now, later in practice, we can actually play with those all coming together and unifying. But for right now, when we're dealing with these emotional identifications and the identification with thought and identification with the bodily senses, it's more important to recognize the separation between them, not the unification. The unification can happen once we have stopped believing in the identification of them. We need that separation at first to kind of break its hold on our emotional well-being. We need to break its hold on the belief system that is propping all of this up. So, to wrap up, in short, if you are feeling anxious, stressful, having some sort of trepidation or feeling of worry in the body, notice how it shows up in the physical sensations. Notice what thoughts are arising about it in whichever way, And either notice that those two are always separate and have nothing to do either with each other or with the external world in which you're living in, or actually play along and imagine that thread that connects those two, the sensations and the thoughts. And then imagine that you're snipping that thread, cutting the connection between the sensation and the situation that I think is going to be a certain way. And then the sensations will just do their thing and probably die out pretty quickly because there are no thoughts that are propelling them and keeping them amped up. The thoughts can come, the thoughts can go, but they're not being reinforced by these bodily sensations that are making them seem more real. They're just thoughts coming and going. And you can recognize that what you can do is be present right here, where none of that is actually happening. The entire exercise of worry, of anxiety, of concern and stress, the entire proposition of all of that falls apart when we become present and realize that none of it is actually happening right now. And there's a solid chance that none of it will ever happen. It's just something that the mind has concocted. It's an imagination that I'm currently getting very invested in and really worried that this part of my imagination is going to turn out to be a profit and actually have an idea of what is really going to happen in the future. And we just don't know that that's going to be the case. So demote thoughts back to thoughts. Demote physical sensations back to physical sensations. Break the link between the two and allow what's here to just be what is here. Be present with this moment as it shows up, with what's in front of you, in your direct experience. Everything else is always just thought, making something out of just this. Completely unnecessary and really bad for the emotional health of this biological organism. Do the kind thing. Recognize that you're getting stressed. Recognize that you're getting anxious and worried. And then break that connection and just be here. Calm, content, and absolutely with, as the world as it is. Enjoy.